the hidden geometry of chaos expansion, contraction, and the fractal nature of market dynamics. Most people look at this chart and see candlesticks. Traders see trends. Analysts see support and resistance. I want you to see something entirely different. I want you to see a living system. Every dynamic system breathes. Everything in nature follows cycles. The human heart contracts and expands. The lungs inhale and exhale. Stars are born, evolve, and eventually collapse. Galaxies rotate around gravitational centers. Even ecosystems continuously oscillate between growth and stabilization. So why should financial markets be any different? Perhaps the market is not simply a collection of buyers and sellers. Perhaps it is another complex dynamic system following the same universal principles found throughout nature. Expansion and contraction. Every chaotic system appears to alternate between two fundamental states. Expansion is the release of energy. Structure spreads. Volatility increases. Distance from equilibrium grows. Then something changes. The system begins to organize itself again. Volatility contracts. Movement becomes compressed. Energy is no longer being released, it is being stored. This is contraction. These two phases are not opposites. They are complementary. Without contraction there can be no expansion. Without expansion there is nothing left to contract. Together they form the breathing cycle of a complex system. Why do we see curved movements instead of straight lines? We often draw straight trend lines on charts. But nature rarely moves in perfectly straight lines. In mathematics, a straight line is an ideal model. In reality, motion is almost always influenced by forces, fields, constraints, feedback loops, and changing conditions. Planets follow curved orbits. Rivers meander. Lightning branches. Tree limbs divide into smaller branches. Even light itself bends under gravity. Perfect straight lines are extraordinarily useful mathematical abstractions, but natural systems are dominated by curvature. Perhaps markets are no exception. The geometry of acceleration. Notice how many major movements appear curved rather than linear. Markets often accelerate and decelerate. Momentum builds, then weakens, then builds again. The resulting trajectories frequently resemble parabolic motion. One possible interpretation is that these curves emerge from continuously changing forces acting upon the system. Within my own theoretical framework, I explore the possibility that these recurring curves may also reflect scaling relationships similar to those found in natural growth patterns, including structures associated with Fibonacci proportions and spiral geometry. This should be understood as a research hypothesis rather than an established scientific fact. The invisible attractor. Chaos does not necessarily mean randomness. Many chaotic systems evolve around what mathematics calls an attractor. An attractor is not necessarily a physical object. It is a state toward which the system repeatedly evolves. Like an invisible magnet, the market may appear to move randomly. Yet over time it repeatedly organizes itself around regions of temporary equilibrium. The price is not wandering without purpose. It is constantly negotiating between competing attractors. One attractor creates many others. Now comes the fascinating part. An attractor rarely exists alone. As the system evolves, smaller attractors emerge within larger ones. Those smaller attractors generate even smaller structures. And inside those, more again. This is fractal organization. The same fundamental behavior repeats across multiple scales. Exactly as we observe throughout nature. Tree branches, river networks, blood vessels, snowflakes, coastlines, cloud formations. Complexity emerges through repetition. A fractal inside a larger contraction. Now I would like to propose an idea. Not a conclusion. Not a proof. But a hypothesis. What if everything we currently observe on this chart, every rally, every correction, every local expansion, is actually part of one much larger contraction? Perhaps these apparent cycles are merely fractal oscillations nested inside a higher-order contraction that extends beyond our current field of view. Just as a single leaf cannot perceive the forest, a single branch cannot perceive the entire tree. Perhaps a local market structure cannot perceive the larger dynamic in which it is embedded. If that is true, then changing the time frame does not simply reveal more data. It reveals another layer of the same geometry. Fractals and scale. One of the remarkable properties of fractal systems is self-similarity. Patterns repeat. Not perfectly, but statistically. The behavior visible on a 5-minute chart may resemble the behavior on a daily chart. The daily chart may resemble the weekly chart. The weekly chart may resemble a multi-year cycle. Different scales. The same underlying process. The bigger picture. If this interpretation has merit, then markets may be understood in a fundamentally different way. Rather than seeing isolated price movements, we see cycles of energy. Rather than random volatility, we see organized expansion and contraction. Rather than disconnected trends, we see nested attractors interacting across multiple scales. The market becomes less like a machine and more like a living organism, not because it is alive, but because it follows dynamic principles that are remarkably similar to those governing many complex systems found throughout nature. Final thought. Perhaps chaos is not the absence of order. Perhaps chaos is simply an order so complex that we have not yet fully learned how to recognize it. And perhaps every expansion, every contraction, every attractor, and every fractal we observe is simply one breath in a much larger system that is still unfolding.